So you've moved to Toronto and you've got your first job at Well.ca. How did that come about, and what were you doing back then?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I actually still think it's like such a good strategy to this day. So my dad, being in sales, I applied to so many jobs when I was in university, like trying to get in with P&G and Johnson & Johnson, like all the CPG companies that all the cool commerce kids went to. I was trying to do that, but I wasn't a cool commerce kid. I literally got rejected from so many of those jobs because I was a science student, not a commerce student. So fine, that's cool. But my dad, I guess, being in logistics and transportation and whatever, I think he was targeting Well.ca to be a customer to move stuff to their warehouse or something. And I was like, oh, this place looks kind of cool. It looks like they're hiring a marketing coordinator. You should apply for it. And I was like, all right. And he was like, you need to find the VP of marketing and hit her up on LinkedIn directly in her inbox, go straight to the hire. I'm like, okay. So I did that. So he helped me. He used some tool to help me find, her name is Paige Malling, helped me find her email address. And I applied the normal route, but then I also just hit her up and was like, hey, here's some stuff that I've done, whatever, right? And just shared my experience with her. And I got an interview and I got the job, which was really cool. And I still think to this day, that is such a smart way to do things. Like, do whatever you can to like stand out amongst the stack of other students or the other papers of people who are applying.
Yeah.
It could be as small as, even if you don't get one-on-one with the hiring manager, just being like, hey, here's my resume. Even when people have done this to me, I'll look at it and be like, oh yeah, this person's pretty legit. And the first thing I do is forward it to the recruiter, whoever, right? And it sets them apart. So yeah, it worked for me. And I still stand by that. I think that that's a really smart approach.
I love that. I totally agree. In fact, when you're applying for a job, do apply the way that the companies prescribe. But I think to the point that your dad made is reach out to the decision maker, because sometimes the HR person is going to be looking at more of checking off the boxes, whereas an executive will see potential and be able to have a more lateral or a more vector conversation with the person. And plus, you're making a connection. You're building a relationship.
And it also shows drive. Like when I see somebody, when I've been on the other side of that, where people have shown up in my inbox on LinkedIn, I'm like, this person wants it, right? Like they're doing things to achieve what they want, and they're trying different things. So I actually think it shows a certain level of like drive and ambition, which especially I would say hands down, that's one of like the key things to look for in anyone you hire, is someone who is going to work their ass off and want to work their ass off to do a good job. Right. And so that kind of, to me, sets those people apart. But you actually said something interesting, which I'm going to double click on, is like, do follow the process that they ask for, because if you don't do that, that also just shows you can't follow instructions, or maybe you think you're too good and you don't go through the normal process. But do both. Follow the instructions, but know that that's not going to do shit. And also go above and beyond and find other creative ways to kind of get at the decision maker. So I think that combo is fire.
Right. But there is a little bit of a spin or a caveat there, is that apply the regular way, and because obviously the audience that's going to, let's say, filter that resume is going to be different from the person you're going to be actually eventually working with or reporting to. Now, what are maybe one or two things to avoid when reaching out to that decision maker, that executive? You want to, for example, I'll give you like a sort of a starting point, and of course, is don't be salesy.
Yeah.
Focus on building an honest connection and relationship with that person to see, versus just saying, "Hey, I saw this job. I don't know. What's your sort of take on? Do you have any other?" Or are there any examples where somebody reached out to you and you were like, oh, that was cool?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is like, make it easy for that person to take action on what you want them to do. So like, attach your resume, maybe like pull out one liner of why you're the right person for the job. Even just being vulnerable and explaining why you're reaching out to them. Like, I think that goes a long way. Like, hey, I'm really excited about this job. I did apply and I submitted my resume, but I'm sure you're getting a lot of these. So I'm really just trying to do whatever I can to get noticed. Here's my resume, see attached, whatever. Would love, if you think I'm a good fit, would love to for you to forward it along or whatever it is, right? I think what a lot of people do is they try to get time with the decision maker. Like, hey, can I have an informational interview or whatever? And I mean, fine, but you're just making it difficult because typically those people will be very busy. And I actually think that informational interviews, that's like a whole other thing. But if you're just trying to get noticed for a job, just make their life really easy. Give them everything they need to know about you and make it easy for them to action. And
I love what you just said. One is make it easy for that person. Think of what their day looks like, and they probably are getting, bombarded with other people maybe who might be reaching out to them now because it's so much more easier to do it on LinkedIn. I don't know how you did it back then. But also having empathy for that person. And then 2, don't go in for an ask right away. In terms of what you said is don't try to get an overcommitment of, can I get you on a call? Make it easy for them. Give them the information that they might need, having cognitive empathy for them, but also make it easy for them to decline. So you're sort of going in with like super passionate, strong opinion, but held loosely. When you don't have that, I need this, you're not coming off as needy and salesy.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just leaving it in their court, right? There's
Exactly.
no action required from that person beyond forwarding it if they feel like they want to.
Yeah.
But if not, it's like, hey, thanks for your time. Like, thanks for just looking at this, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Make it easy for them and don't ask for a commitment right away. Yeah. Leave that in their court. I love that. Okay, fantastic. So you, and all thanks to your dad, he sort of gave you that idea. I'm so glad that you gave a shout out to your dad.
Jordan Belfort though, so.
Fantastic. That's the whole part, is you pass on the knowledge.
Yeah.
That's what makes humans great. We pass, because humans are the only, beings, and maybe this is, this from biology, is when we're born, we're empty vessel. Whereas like a giraffe is born, it knows right away what to go eat. And, they, in the animal kingdom, the baby is born and they know what to do. Whereas, us for a couple of years, we can't even our head will pop off.
Yeah.
So such delicate creatures. Anyways, okay. So you're at well.ca and you started. And so what are you doing there, and what role did you ask for, and what did you start doing? And tell us about your well.ca days.
Yeah. I just started as like a marketing coordinator. So literally did anything they told me to. It was a really cool experience. It was a small company. I still, again, to this day, advise people to start in small companies if they can, because I think you just accelerate your experience, the exposure you get to people and projects, compared to working for like a massive corporation where like you're given your laneway and that is it. You better not step out of that. And like, you won't have the opportunity to step out of that for another year or two. It's very slow growth, in my opinion and in my experience. So yeah, I just did a little bit of everything. I think what I did gravitate to was more of the email marketing side of an e-commerce, business, and eventually like went on to kind of specialize in that space a little bit. But yeah, I just really did it all.
So 1 second. So I think there's a couple of things here for the audience listening. What did well.ca do actually? What business were they in?
Yeah. So they're an online retailer for just like wellness products. So across a variety of categories, it could be food, like home cleaning, beauty, personal care. They have some pet stuff. They just sell a little bit of everything. Their kind of unique spin was they're Canadian, and a lot of their stuff is organic, natural, green, whatever you want to call it. And it was kind of before the whole boom of like all of these. That's just kind of what it's so common now, right? To look for those types of products. You kind of had to go to somewhere like well.ca to find those things. And they basically, their whole thing was there's a bunch of these products and brands out there who are trying to create cleaner alternatives. Let's bring them all into one place so you can easily find those things. And so that's what they were building.
I think you should talk a little bit more about this if you can, especially for people who are coming out of college, university, and trying to find their first job. One is, how do you, get that job, which we just talked about. Mm-hmm. The other aspect of it is what kind of company, scale and size you should join, because it gives you more responsibility.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's joining a startup, like sub 50 employees, sub 100 employees, I would say. Because it's so fast paced and it's so experimental, and there's no like red tape. You're creating the processes as you go. So you just learn a lot faster. I've worked for both startups and I've worked for companies like Bell, right? And I didn't last long at Bell. It was just not a good fit, but it's like a totally different environment. And so I think as someone earlier in their career who are looking to just like soak up as much information as possible, I would definitely recommend that route. And then also the people, I think like building a network and relationships with people is honestly one of the things that I think attributed to my success in my career. And I think it just helps you do that because there's less hierarchical like layers, right? I remember when I was working at Well.ca, I was sitting right next to our CMO, and she was chief marketing officer and merchandising officer at age 22. Like you can't do that in Bell or at some of these other corporations, right? And so if you start to make relationships with those people who have influence in the space, maybe they see something in you as a new someone earlier in their career, like those relationships can actually take you quite far. So I think that that's an important thing to think about too when you're first getting started.
So you have cognitive empathy for the leader that you're going to work with, and you start a conversation with them. You get the job in the company, and if you start small, and I'm also from a similar bent of mine, that the smaller companies start with, the more roles and responsibilities you're going to have. And early on, you're going to have this generalist sort of worldview where you understand how each person works, and you can start relating to the people who are doing, let's say, media buying. Yeah. You can start relating to the business people, the sales people, the marketing people, and how they all sort of function together as a whole. So in that period, when you were at Well.ca and you're sort of dabbling in all these different things, and it's like this really fast-paced environment that you were talking about, are there any interesting learnings, observations, or projects that you worked on that sort of had a click in your mind? You're like, wait, my worldview before this point was this way, but now all of a sudden, I see the world this way.
Got it. I would say like two things. This kind of touches on your other point too. Working for a smaller company and getting exposure to all of those things, like no one knows what the heck they want to do when they come out of university, right? Like, so even just getting exposure to all of those things versus being like, here's your only job. I also think that just helps you kind of hone in on like where your own path, which is really cool. So I think that's actually one thing I took away from Well.ca was I always did this in my career where I just like volunteered myself to do all the things, right? Like if I saw an opportunity or like, hey, I'm interested in this or I'm interested in that, I would always find a way to partner with that person or collaborate because I just wanted to learn about it. So that is really, really cool. And I think that's what happened at Well.ca is I worked on so many different things because I was like a marketing generalist. I did it all. That I really found myself like narrowing in on like geeking out hard on email marketing. And maybe this is where my science background comes in because marketing in general is very like, it's a lot of experiments, right? You're trying to do different things creatively and see how it influences people's behavior. But with email, it was really cool because you can literally A/B test the shit out of everything and get instant feedback. It's not like testing two different radio commercials and you have to run them for whatever and have all these loose feedback signals, right? Like you can literally test so many different things against each other in email as a channel and like learn and influence people's behavior like immediately. And I thought that was so cool. So that's probably the only piece that I took from my biology degree is like running these little experiments. At least in my head, I felt like a little scientist in my lab pouring things into beakers. But yeah, and then I kind of followed that interest. And then my next job I was just that. I was an email marketing specialist and kind of built that part of my career a little bit. But being able to just follow your interests is really cool.